Good afternoon. It's a windy March 29th, 2021, and today I want to talk a little bit about the First Amendment. Now, first of all, full disclosure, I'll be talking about some things about the First Amendment using material taken from a guy. He is a teacher. Look up Constitution for Dummies on YouTube. He's a very good teacher. I've used some of his material for several years to teach my college students because I've never yet had a college student show up in my class knowing the first 10 amendments to the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. So I have to teach them. And most of the time they come out the last day of class knowing the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But I've had people take 2 or 3 of my classes that still can't do it. So take that for what it's worth. Anyway, I think it's a good way to remember. It's the way that I remember, so I'll be referring to the First Amendment portion of this fella's video that he puts out. So anyway, First Amendment. Most of us know that the First Amendment involves freedom of speech, right? But there's actually 5 parts to the First Amendment. There is speech, there is writing, there is religion, there is the right to assemble peaceably, and the right to petition our government. Those are rights that we are all born with, but not all countries have codified that right. In fact, places like Mother England have made it a crime to say certain things. Canada has made it a crime to say certain things. More and more people are saying that, censoring social media is a good thing. Canceling out people who say things and believe things that they disagree with is a good thing. So that's what's inspired me to talk about this. So who is the First Amendment written for? Got to keep in mind, late 1700s, founding fathers had just come out of a many years long war against the greatest military superpower on the planet at that time, with help from the French. But they wanted to make sure that we didn't come out of one super powerful centralized form of government and wander into another one. So that's where this Bill of Rights came from. So First Amendment, the freedom to speak, the freedom to write, the freedom to worship or not as we see fit according to our conscience, and the freedom to gather as a group peacefully, and the freedom to speak out against things that we don't like in our government. Those are all freedoms that are not given to us from the government. We are born with those. Those are natural rights. What makes the United States unique is that our Constitution codifies that. Remember that all 10 parts of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, are basically not saying we give you these rights. They are the people telling the government, thou shalt not infringe on these rights, which we all have. So I've talked about this before. If you don't know what your rights are, how do you know when they're being taken away from you? So who is this freedom of speech? Who are they thinking of that? Let's say you and I are friends. And we're those rare types of friends where we agree on absolutely everything. We get on social media and we are just constantly liking and thumbs up each of our posts, and we bobblehead and like what each of us likes what the other says. Do you and I who agree on everything, do we need a First Amendment to protect the right to do what we're doing? Not really, because we agree with each other, right? So who was the First Amendment meant to protect? The First Amendment was meant to protect people who say things that are unpopular. They were meant to protect unpopular things, including the right to say things that are not true. All right. Oh my God, they're spreading misinformation. Yep, misinformation, disinformation, commonly known as BS. Yes, you have the right to say that. You have the responsibility when the things that you say physically hurt people, but this whole idea of words being a form of violence, that's a fairly new concept. That's only been around for about the last 10 years or so, where, I have a right not to be offended. Here's a news flash. You do not have a right not to be offended. And what makes that right, that First Amendment right to say and do, and print unpopular ideas? Where does that come from? Well, it comes from the idea that we can. I'm going to stop here for just a second. I've got a cat issue. Okay, I'm back. There's the cat again. First Amendment gives us the right to not be afraid that when we say things, we may lose our job, that we may lose, our freedom. There are places. There's a guy named Zoltan Bathory who is a guitarist in the popular with military and law enforcement Five Finger Death Punch metal group, and he came from Hungary, and he said if neighbors wanted to get rid of a neighbor, they just call the police and say, hey, so and so is in possession of U.S. currency, or so and so has made these statements. And a little black car would pull up to that neighbor's house in the middle of the night. That neighbor would be led away, and they'd never hear from him again. All right, that is not unusual in this world. What is unusual in this world is that we have protected rights. We all have these rights. Not all governments protect them. That's what makes us unique. We have protected rights to say things that are unpopular. And with that comes my right to not have to listen. All right, so the difference between the cancel culture and people who do not agree with the cancel culture is, let's say somebody puts a video on YouTube that I find offensive. It pisses me off. And I actually looked at one last week. I was putting together a presentation on Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman, who is a former Army Ranger, former professor at West Point. His book on combat is on the U.S. Marine Commandants and West Point reading list. And this guy took 10 seconds out of a 47-minute video on basically the role of sheepdogs, the idea of people acting out of a love for the flock and protecting the sheep against the wolves. I won't go too far into it. You can look into that on its own. But it made me angry because it was a load of crap. He took a little tiny bit of that video from a 9-hour presentation. The one that I was looking at that he took that cut from was a 47-minute video at a law enforcement and fire department prayer breakfast that he spoke at, and basically said that he's advocating for for cops killing people, that we have to be warriors, and they're talking about warriors killing people, and that was so far off from what the message of that video was that I was pissed. All right, so my response. If I were part of the cancel culture, I would start a campaign to have that person demonetized from their channel and have them preferably kicked out of all social media, because that's never happened in the last year, has it? But because I'm not part of the cancel culture, I just don't watch his stuff anymore. He's got a right to say those things. You've heard of the expression, I disagree with what you say, but I'll defend with my life your right to say it. I'm pretty sure that's not a two-way street between him and me. I will defend his right to spew crap, in my opinion. And I won't watch it anymore. But the difference is I won't come out and say, and nobody else should be able to watch it either. That is the First Amendment in practice. What I write, what I videotape, what I do on my days, on my Sabbath days, whether I go to church, which church I go to, how I pray, that's up to me. I have the freedom to do that. And guess what, Madison Catholic Diocese? You don't have the right to dictate what my worship format is this Easter. So if you want to tell me not to sing during Easter services, I'm going to sing that much louder. Deal with it. All right, off on a little trick there, but understand that is the First Amendment. And the First Amendment involves not only the freedom to be able to say what you want, but the responsibility to tolerate people who say things that you disagree with, and engage with them if you choose in the public square, which is mostly social media nowadays. But understand that they have a right to say what you disagree with, and they have a responsibility to tolerate your response, which may be in conflict with them. And that, can you see, knowing what you know in the world, can you see where that's a little screwed up right now? Where we're trying to silence people for saying things that we dislike or disagree with because we think we have this imaginary right not to be offended. That's an imaginary right. It's not a real thing. We got to grow some bark on ourselves, right? We have to be able to tolerate the idea of being offended because we live in a society where people have the right to be offensive. My cats are taking over my library. So that's all I've got for you today. I want you to think about that. And the next time you get on, Facebook, assuming you're still on there. I've been off for 6 months now. Don't miss it. There was a little bit of a detox period where I was compulsively getting in, trying to open Facebook, and oh yeah, I got to sign in because I don't have a Facebook page anymore. But the next time you get in and you see something that you disagree with, ask yourself, would I defend that person's right to say what they're saying? Even if I think it's the most stupid meme that was ever produced on the surface of the planet, or the most hateful thing that anybody ever said, would I defend that person's right to do that? And if the answer is no, you better revisit the First Amendment and what the intention of the founders was and why that was there. Because they thought it was important. I think it's important. You think it should be important too. So stay safe, stay sharp, stay vigilant, and I will see you next time.